Hey, cool kids. Welcome back into the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you here with us this week, as always. This week, we've got a special guest. Jerry Glazer is on to talk about his book, Vietnam Uncensored 365 Days in a Nightmare. Now, Jerry's on and he's going to talk to us about his book, his experience before Vietnam, during Vietnam, and then after Vietnam. We're going to get into also talking about how do uncles and grandfathers and people that are veterans, how do you share stories about your service with your grandchildren, with your nieces and nephews? How do you navigate what to share, how to share it, as well as we're going to hear Jerry's own personal experience in this matter when he was writing this book. So this is going to be a fun conversation. It's going to be an impactful conversation. I learned a lot about the Vietnam War, and I know you're going to listen to this and learn a lot as well. So, without further ado, let's jump into this conversation with Jerry. Hi, Jerry. Welcome to the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to have you on and sit down and visit a little bit about your book and your experiences with being a grandfather and a veteran.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As we kick things off, let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself. Give us a little bit about your background, including your service time in Vietnam in the Army.
Well, I was drafted. I was out of college. I never joined the reserves, and I believed that the war would. I would believe the propaganda that the government was posting that the war would be over in a heartbeat. So I never really joined anything to absolve myself of doing the service until I graduated university. I was exempt from the draft. But I had graduated. I was applying. I applied for a master's program, and I was working, and the draft showed up. So that's how they got me. They got me. They caught me in that net at that moment in time. As truth would have it, I had family, very close family, living in Canada at that time, and my brother was also living in Canada, working in Canada, and he came. I had 30 days leave to close up all my affairs and report for duty. Right, report to for the last physical. And if I passed the physical, that was it. I was on the train going for once and for all. But I needed to close everything down. So as we were driving to Canada he picked me up at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And as we were driving to Montreal, where he was living and my family was living, he was pulling my chain about defecting, getting out of the Army, going to Canada, getting rid of everything. So I come from an immigrant family. My parents were immigrant. All my relatives were immigrants. They came here after World War II, at the Holocaust. Many of them, my parents were Holocaust survivors. And I was infatuated with America as a kid. I loved America. I loved reading about, listening to the radio. Listen, I grew up at a time when there was no TV. I grew up at a time when there was no cell phones. I grew up at a time where, a 78 record was a thing of the day. And I would be listening to the radio, Batman, Superman, Green Hornet, Barbie Benson, all these wonderful radio shows. My brothers and I would lay on the floor and listen to these programs. When I got older and I could read, I was reading all these American novels, Huckleberry Finn, the Hardy Boys, and I fell in love with the concept of America. Now, that idea that I grew up with, that concept of, when we went to school, we pledge allegiance to the flag every day. I don't know if you were there. I went to school. The uniform of the day was dress pants, a white shirt, no tie, but a white shirt. And you could wear a sweater, no jeans, no long hair. And we pledge allegiance every day to the flag. That's what we did. We didn't learn much about the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, but still, you have this feeling of being part of something. As a kid, you really don't understand what it is. But as an adult, it was ingrained in me. So when I had him stop the car, I think we were halfway to Montreal. I think we were just in Albany. We stopped for something to eat. And I said to him, listen, you need to stop. If you are going to bear down on me to defect the Army and go to Canada, and instead of serving my country, then I don't want to go any further. I want to get out of the car now. I'll take the bus back. And I'll do what I'll have to do, but I'm not going to stand for it. You have to stop trying to convince me otherwise. I intend to serve my country. Now, I did do it. And my parents did not argue with me, did not fight with me, my brother never brought it up again. And I did what I had to do. And then I left. I got on a bus and I left back to the U.S. and reported for duty. The thing is that while I don't regret making the decision and I don't regret serving my country, I do regret that I didn't go to Canada. I'm not that stupid because we were ill prepared for what would happen to us. So when I was in basic training, I was the worst recruit that the Army ever hired. I mean, I was with guys that could do 50 push-ups, go down and do 50 push-ups, nothing. I couldn't do 5 push-ups without my behind being in a pyramid behind me. They would go across monkey bars. You had to do 20 monkey bars hand over hand to get to the mess hall over a pit, right? If I got past 5, I was lucky. And I thought my arms would dislocate. I thought my hand would be down to my knees. If they were running, we had to run a mile before breakfast, a mile before every meal. If we would run, I would be invariably in the last group or the last man in the last group, you know? So that was my physical attribute that I was not made up for it. And I was ridiculed for it and I was chastised for it. I was called names for it and made fun of. But I wasn't the only one. You know, there were a lot of guys that were a lot superior to me. So anything to get out of that training every day, physical training, that's your key there. It's not the weaponry. You think it's knowing the weaponry. It's not knowing the weaponry. The weaponry is easy. It's getting yourself in physical shape to be able to carry all that weaponry in a war zone. You don't think about it. I weighed 140 pounds. When I was fully loaded, I weighed maybe 180.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to say like normal loadout is something anywhere 40 to 70 pounds, right? Something
Could be
like
even
that.
more if you're airborne.
Yeah. If
you're jumping out of a plane. But the point is that people don't realize that you need to walk through 20 miles or 10 miles with all this stuff on you if you're going out to camp out in a field. And you have to be able to carry that. So all the strength is in your legs. It's not in your arms. You don't have to be trapped, but you need to be able to have the stamina or endurance. So anyway, so in basic training, one day a Jeep pulls up, a fellow gets out, and we call to attention, and does anybody want to report to be a warrant officer? Right? There's a rule in the Army, you hear it all the time, never volunteer. I would have done anything to get out of that. Believe me, that training, that physical PT, anything to get out of it. So I raised my hand. I was the only one who went. The only one.
Okay.
They put me in a Jeep and they drive me to halfway across the base and they put me in a Quonset hut. And there were maybe like 7 other guys there. And what they would do is they were drinking coffee. There was, in a far table, there was coffee and donuts. Hey, this is something. So I get myself a black coffee, no milk, no sugar. I get myself a sugar glazed donut. I'm stuffing my face. Not more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, they all call us for attention. They put us in a room. The training was for warrant officer, was for helicopter pilots.
Okay.
Was it for helicopter? That was for the training. Warrant officer was to be a helicopter pilot. So the point is that they didn't tell us that the mortality of a helicopter pilot, right, is between 1 and 30 days in combat.
Yeah.
But they forgot to mention this, but I didn't know that. So anyways, but the point was that you needed a college education to be there, but in order to sign up for that, to become a warrant officer and a helicopter pilot, right, you had to sign up for 4 years. Now, the normal draft was 2 years. I wasn't going to go for 4 years. Vietnam was far away by then, which was basic training. So I wasn't going to go for that. So I gave them a story. Well, I got to speak to my father. I got to do this. I got to do that. And they let me go. And I went back to my barracks. I got back to the barracks at 4:30. I went to sleep. They came in at 6 o'clock. I woke up. Guess what? I did the monkey bars one shot because I wasn't tired. A week later or so, we're carrying people across the field. This is one of the drill sergeant's favorite thing. You put the guy standing next to you, you put him on your back and you carry 20 feet or 30 feet.
Okay.
Airman's carry,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So if the guy standing next to you was 200 pounds, you're dead, right? But but that's what they just paired you up. So I was carrying this guy across the fields, and he was complaining to me that his scrotum sac was bouncing. He was dying, and I was laughing, and I fell down. But when I fell down, the drill sergeant didn't see me. They called us to attention. Another Jeep had pulled up with another officer.
Okay.
And this time they were talking for the officer's training. I don't care. I don't want to know. I raised my hand. They drove me halfway across. There was about 3 guys, extra, that came with me. They put us in a Jeep. They drove us halfway across the field to another little Quonset hut. And inside, again, nice warm place, right? Not cold. At the end of the hall, there was about 10 guys in that at that time. Coffee and donuts. This time they had crawlers.
Okay.
I thought I was in heaven. So they did, and they talked to me. And this time I got out of it again. My father, my mother, the sky is green, whatever I told them. They took me back to the barracks. I was back by 4:00.
All right.
Now they didn't come. The training didn't come back till 5:30 or 6:00. So I slept that whole time. They had to shake me away. I was such a deep sleep that it shake me away. So I went through the motions of whatever, had dinner, whatever we did, cleaned up my boots, whatever, and then the next day. Then about a week later, a truck pulls up. Basic training again. We're on the field. We're doing push-ups, sit-ups, rollovers, whatever. We're doing push-ups and sit-ups, leg raises. And a guy gets out, big, tall, heavy-set drill sergeant, and he has boots up to his knees. So that's airborne. That's
okay.
Airborne. Yeah. So he gets up and he starts screaming. I mean, a voice that knew what it was to scream. The voice sounded like one of these Western singers singing one of these rough Western songs. And I'm airborne. Everybody I know is airborne. My wife is airborne. My daughter is airborne. My son is airborne. All my friends are airborne. I know airborne. Come with me. Be airborne. Be the best. The best of the best. Did I care about airborne? I could care about airborne like I could care about eating dirt. That's how much I cared about. But
right.
anything to get out of the whip, raise my hand. I got into a truck. Now, the truck was loaded with, they needed about 12 people. Later, I found out we had maybe 15, 20 guys in the truck. And the truck, I was still thinking, taking me off, right? Coffee and donuts. Back early. Right. What a day. What a nice day. What another day. This time, he calls me out by name. Truck stops, calls out the names of the guys from that training session, that company, call us out. I'm standing in, I figured he's going to go to a concert. I'm standing back in my own company, my training company. I look around. Now, I wanted to say to him, by the way, where's the coffee and donuts? Right. But I thought better. I thought better of it. I said to him, so I went up to him and said, sir, is this where we're having orientation? He says, there is no orientation. You raised your hand. You're in airborne. Go get your stuff and we'll sign you out. Come back here. You've got 30 minutes to get your stuff and be back here. Wow. So by raising my hand, because they needed X number of men to complete a company that they were putting together for airborne. So I became part of, now, let me tell you, I mean, I was not prepared. Now, I don't know what I did. That airborne training, I will tell you, when they were finished with it was terrible. But the difference between that training and basic training was that I would say for every 5 men, they had 1 drill sergeant.
Okay.
So there was a company of 200 men. They must have had 20 drill sergeants. So they would take us out in groups. They separated us in groups of 5 or 6, like a squad, or 10. And they would take us out, and even though we were part of a group, we were these 10. So they focused on us as a group, right? As a group. They would have 1 drill sergeant or 2 drill sergeants. Now, if we couldn't perform any of those feats, they would, at the end of the day, they would take us out and retrain us. The weekend, Sunday, we didn't train on Sundays. But on Sundays, they would take, again, those guys who couldn't complete, take us to the gym, take us for additional training, take us. So in a way, you had to be a real dope not to succeed there. Because they were set on making sure that every member of that team was supposed to pass. Now, I would say out of the guys who came, they picked up in that truck, right? At the end of the training, there was only 3 of us left.
Wow.
Now, listen to this. I was one of the 3. Don't tell me how. I have no idea. I think the one thing that they needed was endurance. It wasn't strength, it was endurance.
Okay.
When they were finished with me, I had the strength and I had the endurance and I had the skill. And I wound up becoming airborne. Now, to become airborne, you cannot become air. They want you to, remember, the training is 16 weeks when they're finished with you. They want you to join for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, to go forward 4 years. I wasn't going to sign up for 4 years, go more of this. So I didn't sign up. They were very angry with me. The point is that I was accepted to Ranger training. They went crazy. The colonel called me in his office. I was torn down, like, you have to sign up. You can't you can get a court martial. I said, I can't, I'm not signing up for 4 years, sir. I'm going to do the airborne training. Now, he couldn't deny me the training. He couldn't deny it because I passed it. I was accepted. They didn't realize that I was not one of the key people there. Now, out of, let's say we were 200 men in the company. Out of 200 men, 160 got airborne pins. 40 some odd left. Ranger training was about 160, 170. Only 90 passed. Guess who was 190?
You.
Don't ask me.
What?
Don't ask me. I have no idea.
And Jerry, I want to jump in real quick. You hadn't even finished basic training before you got pulled into this.
Exactly.
That's wild.
I never got out of, and not only that, I never got out of the basic training company. My name remained there. I was still part of that. Even when I got out of airborne, I was still part of basic training. In order for me to become airborne, they had to sign me in, and without going for the 4 years, they refused to do it. But I had the pins. I had the training. I came out of there. I was a corporal. I was a corporal. I wasn't like a private. I was a corporal.
Right,
I was ahead of the game. And believe me, I stood up with the best of them. I mean, I even trained with the Marines at Fort June as part of that training.
Okay.
You name it, we did it. The point is that my punishment was when I graduated, which was almost, now you have to think of this. Vietnam was mandated by Congress. The tour of service was only 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So I was counting the months of my training. So that's how it was going. So if I figured if I could go past Ranger training to something else, I don't know what, maybe, I could get past that 1 year, then I wouldn't be eligible for Vietnam.
Right.
But I passed everything within 11 months or 10 months, and my punishment was Vietnam.
Okay.
That was my punishment, was I wouldn't sign up. So I went to Vietnam. While airborne goes to Vietnam as a unit. In other words, if you're part of an airborne unit, 82nd Airborne, 63rd Airborne, 101st Airborne, the whole unit goes, the whole company goes, the whole regiment goes. But if you were by me, they just put me on a plane and sent me over there. Now, here I am. You don't see too many airborne candidates or airborne graduates in a place where it's, like, say, open to the draft.
Mm-hmm.
We're taken.
Right.
No one's giving us up. We have all this training. You're not giving us up. It's like the Navy SEALs. You don't find a Navy SEAL wondering around what he's going to do because no unit will let him be alone. So I was there, and I went to like a different amount of interviews, like you go through the in-country processing. And as soon as the guy saw me and he saw my credentials, he said to me, I have a place for you. And then he assigned me to a unit working for a colonel. That colonel had gone to Vietnam to become a general. He volunteered, and he wasn't going to leave till he became a general, and he would do whatever he needed. And he wanted to work in the Pentagon. So he was a West Point graduate. Graduate. He had friends in the Pentagon, and he was doing favors for them. And he wanted to put together a unit, right, that would be able to complete these favors in the field.
Okay.
Right. Now, the minute he saw me, his dream was finished. Now, I did make him I made him a general. And I got him a job at the Pentagon with the things that I did for him.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost, there was a terrible cost to it.
Yeah.
That's how I got to Vietnam, and that's how I started. And that's what Vietnam Uncensored, 365 Days in a Nightmare, it's about. It's about the beginning of the book is mild, but it's a rabbit hole. It starts off mild. Yeah.
What years were you going in?
In 1968, 2 of the years of most of the men died there.
Yeah, I was going to say 67. That was the whole lead up into Tet, right?
And I was there for Tet.
And I mean, there's lots of Tets because it's a new
No, no,
year,
no. Tet of 68 is
but
the one that
right,
made
right,
the difference.
right.
Over 16,000 American boys under the age of 23 died during that year.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, I
Yeah,
just learned about it in like school and my own readings and things like that.
well, Vietnam Uncensored 365 Days in a Nightmare. It's on Amazon. I wrote the book in such a way. I mean, I wrote it 3 times. I think I mentioned that in a previous discussion. And I decided to put in the history. So when you're reading the book, you're reading about our unit and what we did. But behind it is a separate chapter about the history, what's going on behind the scenes, what's causing the war, what's fueling that war, why are they sending all these kids to die there, why is there such a war, and that's the history of the war is in there. So even though people who are new generation, I'm writing it for people who never knew about Vietnam or knew a little bit about Vietnam or forgot about Vietnam. Mind you, it's over 50 years ago. That this is what happened. This is how we were betrayed. And the truth of the matter is the boys that they sent there were betrayed by the government. The government made a terrible mistake. Terrible. And they refused to acknowledge the mistake. The way they acknowledged the mistake was to fix all mistakes by violence. Bomb the place into dust. That was the way they, or send more men in. And Westmoreland kept asking for more men. Now, when I went, I'll just make this a sidebar, just to make a thing to know. Just imagine this. They ran out in 66, by 66, 67, they ran out of men to draft. They had drafted everyone available, idiots like me, all these kids out of high school that never finished high school, or just finished high school, or not in university, working to make a living, trying to get their lives together. They had drafted all these boys, 2.5 million of them. They needed more. The tour of duty was 1 year. So every year, whoever they drafted was gone. You can't get them for a second year. So they decided where they're going to get the men. They talked about McNamara and Johnson, talked about, well, we can draft all the reserves. We can draft all these kids in college, not finished with college. We can draft anybody we want. They thought, by that time, the war was very unpopular in 67. It was began all these marches and riots and protests. They figured there would be a riot. There would be people going to Washington with guns. So they went back and they decided to redraft all the men to lower the standard, right? And redraft all the people they rejected. So they redrafted 650,000 men who could not read, who did not understand the language, who had deformities, who were low mental an intelligence just slightly above a moron, and they sent them all to Vietnam. Yeah. 650. So I was there, and the only people who objected was a Marine general. He said, "Are you crazy? Look at it. What, we can't train these men. They don't understand the language. They didn't know their left from their right." Guess what? This is what they told them. Deal with what you got. Now, more men died in 68 because this was part of the failings of the men that they got. Now, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody knew. It was called Project 100,000. It was termed by those who know McNamara's morons.
Yeah, I've heard that term.
That's a true term.
Yeah.
Now, I never knew any of that, but we had lost a man in my team, and they assigned a new man to me. There's a World War II character named Sadsack. I don't know if you've ever seen that. If you look it up on the net, you'll see a picture of this skinny guy with a long face and a big nose. He looked exactly like this guy. He was so dumb that he was a threat. He was a man that never bathed, never washed, never brushed his teeth. He was a man that whatever you told him to do, he messed it up. I don't know what he did. You can't go. He's supposed to be a chain in my link. He's supposed to be a link in my chain. We're 6 guys, 7 guys, and he's going to be a link. And that's going to happen. So I went and I complained to my commanding officer. I said to him, "Look, sir, you sent me this guy." He says, "Who is he?" He says, "I don't know anything about him." I said, "He's an idiot." I said, you got to transfer him out. I don't care. He says, well, then you're going to be short a guy. I said, I would rather be short a guy than have him here. Eventually, we found another guy. But the point is the point is he came to us. That was a McNamara moron. I mean, and I tell you, as long as I live, I'll remember. I may not remember a lot of things, but that man I will remember for as long as I live. And of course, this is all chapters in the book that personify what happened there.
Yeah. Well,
that's how I got there, and that's what happened.
And I wanted to ask you too about the book. Is that I know this came out in 2024. Was there a reason that you waited until now to write this book and put it together?
Well. I was when I came out of the service, I had started writing it, but life got in the way. I had to make a living. I had a family, I had a wife, I had kids, and I suffered from intense PTSD. To concentrate on anything was next to impossible. Go back to school was next to impossible. I needed to work. I needed to do something. But I didn't realize I couldn't work for anybody. I couldn't work for anybody. Those days were gone. Vietnam, what happened to me in Vietnam, the trauma stopped me from being an active part of any team, of any organization, of any friendship, except the brothers that I knew, right? We all suffered. So started to write it. I was writing it, and I never wrote it that I was satisfied with it. Now,
Okay.
I was in business. I was pretty successful in business. If one thing Vietnam did for me, it created for me a routine which made me very successful. And of course, if you go through combat and you go through everything I went through, and you were a leader, nothing stops you. Nothing is impossible to achieve. The mindset. It doesn't matter what you tackle. As long as you put in the work and you put in the hours, you're going to succeed. And that's my attitude. And I was very successful because I could work 24/7. It didn't matter. I had a wife who put her foot down. He says, I don't care if you never come home, but you come home Friday night for dinner. We're going to eat dinner as a family Friday night. If you don't come home Friday night for dinner, don't come home at all. That was, she put her foot down. Finally, after I wasn't coming home, not that I had a girlfriend, having a girlfriend,
yeah,
never occurred to me.
Working.
But work, I could work 24/7. And I did work 24/7. I would travel. Didn't matter. It didn't matter what I did. I was 24/7 customers with suppliers, doing my business, building a business. I would say I sold that business. I sold one business. I started another in California. I sold that business, and then I wound up in New York. Right? And in New York, I was working, and New York is a place where it's like you're staying with a thimble under a waterfall. That's how much business is there. There's no way. I mean, you just walk into a building and you start at the top floor and you just press buttons. You walk into offices, by the way, and there's a customer every day. Every day there's a customer. And the numbers are, if you have the money or you have the credit, the numbers are substantial. I'm not saying that I was the wealthiest guy on the block, but I certainly wasn't afraid of banks or customers. Didn't matter. I didn't care if the guy was 500 million or $1 billion. Some suppliers, one guy says to me, well, don't you think are you large enough? He wanted to give me an order for almost 1 million yards of something. 1 million. That's a big number. A lot of money. He says to me, are you too small to handle this? Are you sure? He says, I said, listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. Because he was arguing at the price. I said, I'm not going to change the price, but I'll tell you what I'll do for you. He says, what? I'll deliver it on time. So he said, he says, you got some mouth on you. I said, no. I said, I know what's possible. I said, by the way, you should know I'm a Vietnam veteran. I know the story. Don't tell me the story. Everybody tells me your story. I said, it will get done. He says, well, I'm going to give it to you. So I delivered it, and he was happy with it. I was very diligent. So the concept of doing business, the Army taught me that. Taught me that nothing is impossible to achieve.
Okay.
That's one thing I can tell you. And remember, you have to make decisions snap decisions in a certain amount of time, where life and death, existential, but no decision you make is right. Whatever decision you're going to make can't be right, but you have to take a decision. Go left or go right. You can't go left, forward, or right. One or the other. Go where you're going to go. And no matter where you go, nothing is going to be good. So imagine that kind of pressure every day. It's not that it happens, you see in the movies, they do a mission and this goes wrong and this. No, here is you finish this, the next day is something else. The day after that, it's another thing. It's one after another, after another. And then when you get back to base, maybe you have 2-3 days to clean up and then you're out again.
Yeah. Yeah. That operational tempo, right? That they talk about.
Well, I don't know. I knew nothing about it. Listen,
Okay.
I can't
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you I'm such a genius that I understood. I understood nothing. All I understood was I didn't realize that the training that I received prepared me for what they were going to throw at me. It didn't occur to me that I was ever going to use it. Look, we did hand-to-hand training. I would say the hand-to-hand training we had. At the end of the day, the advanced training was you can kill a man in 5 moves, offensive or defensive. In 3 moves, offensive or defensive. Kill a man in 3 moves, offensive or defensive. That's what we trained, day and night. Now, was I in hand-to-hand combat? No. Once in that whole book, once in that whole tour of duty, once it came to me. And the one time it came to me, just the one time, I was a dead man. And then I performed the single act that I was taught 1,000 times, and it saved me. Imagine. Just to think, when I think of it, and there was no terror, there was no action, we were running, we were finished with a mission and we were running through the forest, we were running through the jungle. And we're running through the jungle and we're not looking, and we ran smack into a Viet Cong unit. We actually smacked into them. And they were armed. And that was it. It was either us or them. And the guy grabbed me, and I was a goner. I should have been a goner. If I was a normal combatant, not trained like I was trained like that, he would have had me. I just got out of it. I was injured, but I wasn't mortally injured. He was supposed to cut my throat. He never made it.
Wow.
Imagine. Wow. That's crazy.
Hey, I want to pivot over a little bit and ask you, in terms of your experience, your opinions, maybe some of the folks that you know, as you're starting to become grandfathers and fathers, and kids might see boot camp graduation photos and they might see some things around and they start asking questions about service. I'm going to ask you first, how are some things that you would suggest for parents to guide their kids when asking a grandfather about service?
Well, let's be fair. There are very good things about military service, and then there's a positive side, and then there's a negative side. The positive side is serving your country is an honor. And that's true. There are many men who go into the service as a career, and serving your country is an honor. War is not, but service is. And then again, it's something to be a patriot. We don't think of patriotism like once upon a time you're a patriot. One son to the army, one son to the church, one son to the doctor. We don't think of it that way anymore. But to talk about military service to the wealthy, right? They don't know. They think we're all a bunch of chumps. Whoever serves are chumps. Even Trump thinks we're chumps. He had said, I don't know his view today. I think he regrets saying that, but he said it. The point is that you think that military service is for the low-level guy. But we have West Point. We have Annapolis. We have Naval Academy. We have the Air Force Academy. These are thousands of boys, men, dedicating their lives to military service to their country. They come from all walks of life. They come from wealthy families. They come from heritage families where their grandfather and their father before them all were in the military. So not everybody is low level. It's not low hang. Just because you're in the army doesn't make you a low level fruit. Now, unfortunately, Vietnam, the citizens blamed the soldier for the war. So those boys, when we were coming home, there were boys attacked at airports, especially in California. They were spit on. They couldn't find jobs. Businesses wouldn't hire them. You're talking about people, you talk about an officer in the army, and he graduates he gets out of the army after being an officer. You're telling me he wouldn't be a fantastic leader in a company? They make the best leaders. You know why? Because they have no soul. It's all business. You can't get around a captain who was a captain in combat and he has a team to perform. He'll perform, and anybody on that team, he'll just get rid of them. Doesn't care. Because it's not friendship. It's brotherhood, but it's brotherhood. Everyone has to pull their punches. Everyone has to do their job. Where I came from, the man standing next to you would gladly lay down his life for you. Not think about laying down, his gladly lay down his life for you. If it's between you and him, it would be him, right? And if you were injured and you were in a field and they were firing, you ran into the field to get your brother and bring him back. I saw men run and die in the midst of trying to save a guy that was wounded. We were running to get up to a pickup. We go to the bus stop to get picked up from our mission. And we came across a kid laying in the mud at the edge of a field. He was like, we just heard him. And we reached down, we pulled him up. He was desperately wounded. Don't leave me here. We put him carrying him on our shoulders across a field, maybe a football field long, to get to the helicopter. We put him on a helicopter. Whether he lived or died, I don't remember. I don't know. But we put him on a dust-off. But the point is that we carried him. We didn't leave him there. The right thing to do was to keep going.
Right.
Because the helicopter was taking off with us or without us. They touch down. They have X number of minutes. They're going to stay on the ground, and then they're gone because the rocket will find them.
So with I guess the telling.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
So if you when my kids were growing up, I wasn't in any position to really discuss much with them, and they were, let's say, you can't tell much to a kid 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Even at 15, there's very little interest. They're interested in what they're interested in. At 16, 17, 18, 19, but in their later years, in their 20s, they wanted to know. They wanted to know. Now, my kids didn't know much about the war, and I was traveling a lot, and I was always very rarely home. And when we went out, we didn't discuss Vietnam. I did tell stories, but I never told the stories that would hurt me. This I tell you. There was lots of comedy that goes on there, like the comedy with that there's lots of funny things that happen. And those are the stories I would tell, stories that are unusual, comical, not comical at the time, but comical when you relate them back. But I never told the stuff that was graphic. There was a lot of graphic stuff. And I put that in the book. Terrible thing. I put that in the book. Now, I didn't want my kids to. I would never discuss that, and I never discussed the terrible stuff. When I was writing the book, I wrote down the stories. I wrote down like 10 stories, and I decided which of the stories I'm going to put in because the book didn't want to be long, didn't want to be an encyclopedia. Right? So I narrowed it down to just the right amount of stories to coordinate, just to give the reader the idea of, my God, look what they went through. And it was a touch of the iceberg, what I put in the book. As I finally wrote the book and I published the book, right? And I'm posting every day. My daughters are calling me. I never knew you did that. My daughters are calling me. Dad, you never told me that. I said, Dad, you went. You act. Yeah. He says, well, we knew because the medals were all on the wall. I'm looking up the medals. You're a hero. I said, yes, I'm a hero. No, Dad. It's crazy. I'm watching this movie, and then they would ask me about, let's say, a movie about Vietnam. Is this true? Is that true? Is this true? Is that true? So my answer to any story about Vietnam, I said, look, make up a story. You would never be, but make up a war story. In the war story, I want you to put Dracula, Frankenstein, Superman, Captain Marvel, put whoever you want, right? And write the worst story you can write. Killing, murder, cannibalism, whatever you want. And when you finish with that story, I'll believe it. I said, because what I saw there was impossible. What I saw doesn't make any sense. You see men performing acts that are not human. You see men doing things that are not human. You see men degrading themselves, falling to lowest depths of humanity you can imagine. The war drove them crazy. The war drove me crazy. to stop yourself from doing that, if you're in the field, to stop yourself from doing all that, that takes courage. That takes a certain amount. Now, I didn't allow a lot. Like my guys, I never allowed it. But there were units that took souvenirs of human body parts. Come on. Now, you don't tell this to children.
No.
Now, my grandchildren come to me now. They can't get over it. They want all my Army T-shirts. They want all my Army patches. They want all my Army medals. Don't throw anything away. I want to take this home. So I said, so my wife says, so I gave my for his birthday, I told my grandkid, my grandson, he could pick any. He picked my Army T-shirt. It says Army. I wear it everywhere. And my granddaughter took an Army jacket to wear. So I tell them the stories, but I don't tell them the depth. Now, she started reading them. And my daughter told me she was reading the book. What do I think? I said, well, she's 15. She should know. I spoke to my wife. My wife said, Jerry, listen to me. She's 15 and she understands the language and she understands what happened. That's not going to surprise her. But what will surprise her is that you wrote it. She's going to identify you with that person. It's one thing for her to go to a movie and see it. She doesn't know those people. She walks out of the movie, it doesn't stay with her. But if you say it, if she reads what you wrote, she's not old enough to digest it. She's not old enough to understand it. And that's the truth of it. Some things you can't. So I called my daughter back. I said, you know what? I spoke to your mother, and I agree with her. I said she shouldn't read past the first couple of chapters. I said, because it gets to a point where she'll identify me with that story, and that's not who I am to her. I'm a grandfather. I shouldn't be that person in that book, and that's who I'll become. So she said to me, okay. Now, she did read the first 4 chapters or whatever, and she wanted to move forward, but she stopped. And then I said, what did she say when she said? She says, no, she understood. I explained it to her why. That was it. But to tell grandchildren that of war, of what it means to be a soldier, there's honor in that. There's honor, there's a learning experience, a learning curve that you learn there. And it depends. It's like everything else you do in your life. It's what you make of it. You could become a low life in the Army, or you could become a high life in the Army. You could become good, or you could become bad. Unfortunately, most people turn to the easy route. You know, it's hard to be a man of integrity. It's easy to be a scoundrel.
Yeah.
You know, that's the point. So that's that. The Army is the same way. But I'm proud of my service. And I'll tell you this: they asked 73 veterans, Vietnam returning veterans, if knowing the outcome in advance, would they serve again? Here's a statistic: 73% said yes.
Wow.
And I'm one of them.
That's wild, especially considering that war, right? I mean, it's not asking World War II vets or some different things. It's that one in particular, I think, has got a real sore spot for the country and the people there.
73% of us said yes. You know why? The brotherhood. We saved lives. We saved our own, and we saved lives of civilians. This is what we did in the field. So even though my unit was not a search and destroy unit, there were units that actually hunted the enemy to kill them. We never did that. We were an extraction unit. We went in to take out people that were captured or perform a certain function undercover to get information or to get logistics or to steal something. We weren't there to find the enemy, kill them, and then count the blood trails, whatever. But there were units that did that. They went to hunt the enemy. We never went to hunt the enemy. We ran into the enemy many times. We had firefights with the enemy. But 9 times out of 10, we were pursued. Instead of us pursuing them, they were pursuing us. If we were going to be shot, it would be in the back. I can tell you.
Right.
We're going the opposite direction.
Wow. Hey, question for you here is, with the veterans that are still with us, do you think it's really important for them to document their time in their service?
Absolutely. Look, Vietnam was a dirty war. I say it was a dirty war, which was useless and it was purposeless. It started on the concept of halting communism in Southeast Asia, which had nothing to do with the United States, and we had no business there. Kennedy is the one who sent in advisors, and he had second thoughts. He wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. I don't know if you have, this is a book, and that in that book he illuminates Americans who stood up against the the wind of the day and stood against it and fought for what they thought was right. You could look at people like Martin Luther King. He didn't write about much, but I think Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, people like this stand up against what's wrong, right? They stand up against it and they die for it. They'll die for it. And when Kennedy re-looked at Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh was an ally of the United States during World War II. He helped the U.S. hunt down pilots. He gave them logistics. Because for him, to them, the French was the Chinese were the enemy, the Russians were the enemy, and the French were the enemy. And now the U.S., he never expected the U.S. to be the enemy because he was an ally. And he expected that when the war was won, with his help, and they expelled the Japanese, and the United States came out, Vietnam was whole, he expected the United States to give him to rule the United States. But what he never realized was the opinion, the animosity, the hatred for communism was so strong that the United States would not give it back to a communist. So he went to war. He began fighting the United States. So the United States called a truce. Kennedy said, okay, look, let's have 2 years of peace. We'll withdraw, you withdraw, we'll have peace. And at the end of 2 years, we'll hold elections. And whoever wins the elections, that'll rule the country. So the United States put in a puppet government. The puppet government was corrupt. Puppet government was mean. Puppet government were a bunch of nutcases. And of course, at the end of that, remember, Ho Chi Minh was considered the George Washington of his country. When they took a poll, they realized that he would win. That Vietnam would be won by the country. Fair and square election. They reneged on the promise. That began the Vietnam War. That's what began it. That's what made it happen. The United States caused it. The United States should have honored it. At the end of the day, after 11 arduous years, more than 58,000 American boys under the age of 23 died. 150,000 returned wounded. 22,000 committed suicide after returning. And 300,000 suffered the after effects of Agent Orange and other diseases. And this they thought was a better idea than giving. And the United States pulled out. They didn't like lose the war, but they just pulled out. They left. Now, during the peace accord, when they were signing the peace agreement, I forgot the names of the American representative and the Vietnam general. They were there, and the American representative says the congressman says to this general, we never lost the war. And a lot of Americans believe that. America never lost the war. We could have won the war, but we didn't fight it squarely. But we never lost the war. And the Vietnam general's answer was, that may be so, but it's irrelevant.
That's true. Well, and I guess, too, is by making sure that people write down their history and their time spent there, it helps the generations, whether, my generation or the grandkids or whatever, to understand and be careful about those things in the future, right?
Well, look, the Vietnam War proves many things. One of the things it proves is that the government is not always right. It also proves that the war was run by the military-industrial complex. People were making millions of dollars. Once they were in it, they couldn't get out of it. It was run by men. They must have had high testosterone levels. There must have been a problem there. I have no idea why. In the face of all that was happening, they knew that they should pull out, but they didn't. They pull out. And it was being pilloried. I mean, what Nixon, here's something that most people don't know. When they had the Paris Peace Accords, Johnson's administration was coming to an end. The presidency was coming to an end, and they were going to have an election. So Johnson wanted to create peace, have a peace accord. So he created Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh had come to the American administration to stopped that war 100 times. And the Americans, just to have a non-obligation a peace accord, and the United States stopped, wouldn't do it. Why? Because they could not believe that a country that let smaller than the size of California, no Air Force, no Navy, no Army to speak of, could win against American might. That was the reason. It was the only reason. Guess what? These little people, they had underground cities. They had been fighting the Chinese for 1,000 years. They were occupied by foreign domination for 1,000 years. They knew how to fight. They knew how to resist. They weren't going to just give up for no reason. They weren't going to make a deal with the Chinese. They hated them. They weren't going to make a deal with the Russians. They hated them. They weren't going to make a deal with anybody, although the Russians and the Chinese wanted to help them at the end because they were against the United States.
Right.
But the point is that there was nobody there. There was no reason for them to do what they did. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, Vietnam won the war and Ho Chi Minh said it at the very beginning of the war. He said, look, you can kill 10 of us for every one we kill of you, but you will tire of it first. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. And during the Paris Peace Accords, what I want to get to is that Johnson went to create peace. Nixon and Kissinger went to the North Vietnamese first. This is what they told them. This is history. I'm not making it up. It's hard to believe it's true. He said, don't make peace with the Johnson administration. Break the peace. We'll win the presidency and we'll make better peace for you. We'll give you a better deal. And as soon as he became president, he tried to bomb them into dust. It was a lie.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
I can't. You can't. I mean, people can talk to you about all kinds of things the United States did, but I mean, you think about what we did to the American Indian. We broke every peace treaty we ever made. Well, here it is. Here it is in 1967, 68. Here it is duplicating again. They couldn't keep the peace. They couldn't hold the peace. They couldn't honor a treaty. They should have let Vietnam win the election. They would have been done. Now, Vietnam is one of our largest trading partners. China became one of our largest trading partners. So holding communists in Southeast Asia, this is what it was all about. This is why 58,000 boys lost their lives. This is why 150,000 came back wounded, marked for life, and another 20,000 committed suicide. This is what that's all about.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, too, not only is Vietnam a large trading partner, but they're inviting us now in as a protection against Chinese in that South China Sea area and securing their fishing rights. And
the world turns in mysterious ways. That's all I can say.
It is.
I mean, but that's one of the lessons, the true lessons of that war, is that you elect politicians, but you have to hold them responsible. And it was all these protests, the protests of all these college kids that finally came together to help put an end to that war, to help us get out of that war, because it was just beyond. And there was a draft. The key was, it wasn't that this was soldiers who enlisted. They took kids out of high school. I mean, if you look at there are posts that there are certain sites on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. Some people post every day. They post like 4 or 5 or 6 dead. And they put a picture of the guy. They put the unit he was with, where he came from and why, how he died, right? And you look at the pictures of these people. They're kids. They're a bunch of kids. I post pictures of units, of my unit. I'm looking, I can't believe we were so skinny. I can't believe that we were just a bunch of just young boys. Some of us were big, but by those kids that were drafted, we were kids. We were just kids. I mean, doing these terrible things, training us to do these terrible things, changing us for once and changing us forever. Never the same. It's easy to say, someone is crazy, but it's not, but it's hard to imagine that you were made crazy. That's what's hard to imagine. How did they make you crazy? What did they do? So it's a lesson to be learned. And if nothing else, hear the stories of men who served their country honorably. They deserve the respect of that. They deserve the respect. They deserve the honor of knowing what they do. Tell their story, whatever that story is. I don't care what it is. I'll tell you it's probably, even if they exaggerate it and make it up, it's true. I'm going to tell you it's true. because it can't be anything worse than what I saw. And it went for everyone. It went for and everyone died there. Everyone died there. Privates, corporals, sergeants, drill sergeants, master sergeants, lieutenants, warrant officers, captains, colonels, light colonels, generals. Everyone died. Nurses, everyone died. There was so many people there killed. It's just unbelievable. You're looking at West Point graduate, Annapolis graduate, this one graduate. I mean, you're not talking about stupid people. You're talking about people who were, and I do believe this. If the war taught me anything, it taught me that every individual has greatness within him. I don't care if he has an education. I don't care if his social standing. I don't care if he can speak the language. Every individual possesses an element of greatness. We're all born with it. It only takes the right opportunity, right, or the right set of circumstances for that greatness to come forward. And you see it, 9/11, the firemen who ran up a building that was collapsing. The building was collapsing. They ran up to get those people anyway. They died in the process. This single element, this single thing, we never know what 58,000 of these boys would have brought to this country. What would they have brought? What act of greatness would they have committed in America? We lost it. We gave it up. We gave it up. We gave this up. And you see policemen, firemen, soldiers, all fighting to save somebody else, not themselves. They're fighting to save something else. Remember, anyone in the service that requires violence, that can require violence or does invite violence, those people are sacrificing themselves to accomplish something for the public. Now, it's not appreciated. You see a lot of people are against the police. They're against the Army. They're against the Navy. It's ridiculous. Here are men dedicated to serving their country. If their country is wrong, if their country makes a mistake, they're still obligated to serve. It's not their fault. They have to do their duty. And this is a lesson to be learned. And this is what needs to be taught. And what also needs to be taught is that you do come away with bad things, but not all the time. You can come away with great leadership skills. You come away with a dedication to purpose, a dedication to helping others, a dedication to your family, a dedication to people whom you work with. And some of the best leaders we have were once military leaders, because this is what the military is. It's only that. It's nothing else. You're not in it for the money. I can tell you.
No.
You're not in it for the money. Listen, for all I was paid $300 a month. Boy, was I rich. Putting my life on the line every day, 10 times a day. Yeah.
Right. Jerry, I know the proceeds from your book are going to the Kauffman Fund, and I wanted to ask you as we start to wrap things up, tell us a little bit about the Kauffman Fund. What do they do? How do they help people out?
Well, the Kauffman Fund is run by Wayne Kauffman, who started the fund in honor of his brother who passed away. He didn't pass away in the service, but they were both Vietnam veterans. He served as Vietnam veteran. He came back and he started his fund. And what they do is they have all these programs. They raise a fair amount of money from I'm trying to remember the date, 1990 something was. So far, for the time they've been there, they've donated more than $2 million in funds to help veterans in need. And they have all these programs of, he needs housing, he needs medical aid, he needs the tax information. And you can find them at theKaufmanFund.org. They have a program, and they're really good people. And they have, all these affairs, casino night and golf tournaments to raise money for the fund. And they don't take a cent out. I know that as a fact. And these are good people, and money goes to helping any veteran that comes to them, or any veteran organization that comes to them that needs money to do something with it. And there are a lot of organizations. Now today, once upon a time, there was nobody. Even the government didn't help the veteran. But today, there were a lot of veteran organizations with veterans such as myself supporting veterans in need. No, not necessarily Vietnam veterans any longer, but all veterans that are coming back are all suffer trauma. Because in a combat zone, you wake up in trauma, you live in trauma, and you go to sleep in trauma. You can't come back. You cannot come back and not be affected. All those boys are affected. And there's troubles fitting in, transitioning. Now they have transition teams All the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they all have transition teams that transition, and they have transitioning departments in the government where if the guy needs help, he needs to be able to get a job. They help him find a job. They help him find this. They give him his skills. They give him his training. The GI Bill helps, and then they have all kinds of things for veterans. The point is, though, is that a veteran who's suffering from PTSD does not take advantage of anything, even though it's there. You can say, well, he doesn't even take his medication. I mean, try to get him to go to school, try to get him to focus on something. It's very difficult for these guys. I know it was difficult for me and my buddies. I mean, and one of my buddies did commit suicide. I mean, it's true. And nothing we do could help him. He was just gone. He was gone. I mean, you can't, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I can't say what to do, but the government was not there to help him. And they didn't recognize PTSD until 25 years after the fact. They didn't recognize Agent Orange until 30 years after the fact. All these things they didn't recognize. And people don't realize, I mean, I had a friend, we both went in for a field transfusion. He came down with Hep C and I didn't.
Wow.
Contaminated blood supply.
Yeah.
He died in New York. I met him a couple times, and he died. Eventually, it became a liver disease. He lived with it for a while. I think he died, I would say it was what year was that? It must have been 2007, 2010 he passed away. I don't remember the exact date, but yeah, he finally succumbed to it.
Wow.
Imagine dying from that.
That's crazy.
Is that crazy?
So, hey, Jerry, I've had you on for a little while. What's the best way people can get in contact with you, buy the book, just follow what you're doing?
Well, you can find the book on Vietnam now Uncensored, 365 Days of the Nightmare on Amazon. It's been a bestseller for a while, surprise to me. You can also go to the website, vietnamjerry.com, and you can find out my profile is on that website. Plus, if you subscribe to the website, you get I send out a newsletter every week with private information. If you buy the book, there's we're going to be giving an award. I'm giving out some prizes of authentic Vietnam memorabilia when we do the draw. We're going to be doing a draw, so everybody who buys the book, when we have to put up a special page for that. So you can put that on your receipt, and then we're going to pick it up and give about 15, 20 prizes away, good ones.
Okay.
And that would be, and then of course I'm on every website, vietnamjerry.com. Or Jerry Glazer, you can look me up. I'm on X. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Medium. I'm on Substack. I'm trying to get on Goodreads, but I don't understand it. I wish someone would tell me how to do that. I just can't figure that one out. All these platforms are very hard for me to learn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to put the links to as much of that into the show notes as we can, so folks can easily get a hold of you. And Jerry, is there anything about your book, anything about your experience that I haven't asked you that you want to bring up before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just want to mention that the book starts out in a humorous fashion because not everything was terrible. But I wrote it in such a way is that it takes you slowly down a rabbit hole to where at the end of that deal, you scratch your head and you say, wow. You don't see it in the beginning. And you don't see it even as we go along. Slowly, slowly, slowly. And that's what happened to us. And that's what happened to me. Not military service in jail, but combat has a way of just sucking you dry, sucking your soul out. It just, no matter what you do, even though you know what's happening, even though you turn yourself around and you say, did I just do that? And yeah, you just did it. And you didn't care about it. And that's what happens to a lot of boys that came back. And you don't notice the changes there because everyone's the same. But put yourself on civilian soil and try to work for somebody who tells you what to do. That's pushing a button. That's the button you can't push. Tell a Vietnam veteran what to do, and that's the end of it. He's gone. He's off his rocker. I'm off my rocker. You want to push a button, just do. We want to push that button. I was in business, and I had customers, big customers, who pushed the wrong button, I had a huge order, and I blew him away right there on the spot because he pushed that button, and I couldn't contain it. I couldn't contain the anger, and that's it. So cancel your order, cancel everything. I'm not going to ship it. To hell with it. And I was back in my office. I was no sooner back in my office than he called me. He says to me, what just happened? I said, well, he says to me, are you serious? Are you cancel the order? I said, I can't cancel the order. I said, it's done. I said, but here's the point. You can't talk to me like that. You cannot talk to me like that. You can talk to other suppliers like that, but you can't talk to me. You know who I am. You know where I came from. That type of language is not my language. I said, I will not be disrespected like that. I said, if you want to cancel the order, I accept it. I can get rid of it. I'll lose my deposit, so what? I said, but you won't get the goods. And I said, you need those goods, because if you don't get the goods, Macy's will throw you out.
Yeah.
It's too late for you
Wow.
to. So he says to me, well, I'm going to get the goods. Are you going to give me the terms? I said, I'm not going to change the terms. Why, are you going to cheat me? He says, no. He says, look, Jerry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I said, no, I know you didn't mean it, but neither did I. Okay, so let's call it quits. He says, come over here and shake my hand. So I ran back to his office, and I shook his hand, and we became friends again. But I blew it all away. I was ready. That's what happens to a Vietnam veteran. And that happened again another time. I'll just make this fast. I was walking down the street, and somebody tripped me. I was dragging my suitcase, little suitcase behind me for samples, and a guy tripped me. And I stand up, and there's this, I look like a homeless person. He's standing there laughing. So So I said, did you just trip me? He said, yeah, I just tripped you. So what are you going to do about it? Now, I'm already 70 years old then, right? I took that bag. I swung it at him. I hit him in the head. I took him and he went down. I took him down. And on the down, he was bigger than me. He was younger than me. He was stronger than me. He was struggling. And 2 cops came and pulled him off. The female, it was a guy and a girl. The female was talking to this guy, right? And this guy was saying to me, he says to me, what happened? I said, well, he tripped me. And he said he started a fight. And so what do you do? He says to me, well, he says, do you see over there? There was a switchblade on the ground. He was ready to use it. In another minute, I would have been gone. They came just in time. I told my wife never forgave me for it. Never forgave me for it. I almost ended it. Imagine, went to Vietnam, and that anger, that temper, if you push the button, I can't control myself. It's really hard. Now that I'm retired, it's easier. I have less stress, less, all I have to deal with is my wife, but I can't be angry at her because she owns everything. What am I going to do?
Right. Well, that's awesome. Well, Jerry, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I've learned more about that experience and about Vietnam veterans, and I appreciate that time that you've spent with me today.
We're a good bunch.
Yep.
We're a good bunch. Yeah.